Here we are on the draw with a little bit of a sketchy hand. We don't have that second land for this Cathartic Reunion. We also don't have a big dredger. We have a Life from the Loam, but I think we can afford to go to 6 on this hand. And this hand is a little bit better. I'm going to keep it, even though it's not great. We're really missing something like a Cathartic Reunion or a Faithless Looting to be able to get these dredgers into the graveyard. However, we can still just simply cast Life from the Loam. That's one way of doing it. It's not the fastest way, for sure. But because we were already on 6 cards, I think this is a keep. Now, it looks like our opponent... Okay, so our opponent does have a Thought-Knot Seer, which is worst case scenario for us. Double Temple into Thought-Knot. So, that's pretty unlucky. And if our opponent takes the Life from the Loam, we would be without an immediate dredger, but it looks like our opponent went for the bigger dredge card, the Stinkweed Imp, which makes sense as well. So I'm just going to untap. We drew a Neonate. But I think the play is still casting the Life from the Loam, getting that into the graveyard, and just saying go. Next turn we can dredge the Life from the Loam. It looks like our opponent is playing Eldrazi Tron. And on the play, this type of draw is pretty hard to beat no matter what deck you're on, let alone a mulligan to 6 into a pretty bad hand. So we'll see, but it's not looking great. So we want to be able to get a dredger into the graveyard. We have one in the deck more. Salvage, but it's not exactly what we want. So, okay. We can cast Life from the Loam, or we can Insolent Neonate. I think going with a Neonate makes more sense. So we can either dredge the Salvage, or we could dredge a Life from the Loam, which I think is probably better. So we can cast the Loam first. And I'm not gonna even bother fetching with the Wooded Foothills there. So discard this Prized Amalgam. Hope to hit a Narcomoeba here, essentially. So we were able to hit a Narcomoeba. So that maybe gives us a little bit of a hope, since we're going to get these 2 Prized Amalgams into play. Potentially do some blocking with them. But if our opponent has another Smasher or a Walking Ballista, something like that, that is actually just lethal here. If not, we can chump the Thought-Knot, take 5 from Smasher, and proceed from there. Could be an Endbringer, something like that. That would be pretty bad news. Yep, so it is going to be an Endbringer. And we're just untapping here, as you can see, because there's no longer a dredger in the yard. So we can cast this Faithless Looting. But we're actually just dead here. There's not really much we can do, so just going to go to the next game on this one. So we're going to be on the play, and definitely have some decent options here as far as sideboarding goes. The Thoughtseize comes in a lot just because it's kind of a catch-all. And the Lightning Axe is a pretty good removal. So those are the cards that I'm most interested in boarding in for this matchup. And as far as cutting cards, we're just kind of shaving at this point. So cutting a Thug, a couple of Blood Gas is normally okay. You can normally get away with cutting a couple Blood Gas, a Haunted Dead, and sometimes you can cut Conflagrate, one Conflagrate. So keeping in all the Neonates, all the Lootings, all the Reunions, shaving a little bit on some of the combo-y type cards, the Dredgers, and then the Blood Gas. So nothing huge as far as sideboarding. And we're on the play this time around, and it is a one-lander, but we have double Neonate plus 3 Dredgers. So I would like to keep this. And this time it's our opponent's turn to take a mulligan. So got that going for us. So I'm just going to take a draw step. We could have sacrificed this Neonate, but I'd rather take a draw step. Maybe we just hit the land, because what we're really looking for here is a land, because then that turns on these Cathartic Reunions, and now we have 2 Cathartic Reunions. So I'm actually just going to hope to get lucky in a sense and not dredge here. Just go ahead and take a card. So hope we get a land. Did not get it. So we can go ahead and just play another Neonate and rebuy on that same play for next turn. So take a draw step. If we don't get a land, then we may have to try to Neonate into the land. So we've had a bunch of draw steps to try to get this second land to turn on these reunions, because once we do end up reunioning, it's going to put us in a great spot, but we're not going to be able to do much until we are able to cast a reunion. So I'm going to go ahead and attack here. Now we did find a Faithless Looting, so this is going to give us another avenue as well. So even if we don't immediately find a land here, we can still do some things with the Faithless Looting. But we did find a land. Okay, great. So now it's time for this Cathartic Reunion. And we have plenty of dredges in the graveyard, which is good news. So we're just going for maximum dredgage, essentially, if that's a term. So it looks like we have 1 Prized Amalgam here coming in, and 1 Narcomoeba. So not the best draw. Not the best dredges, I should say, but still adequate. But now our opponent has Tron online, so that's pretty bad news. So we see this Mind Stone getting sacrificed. We'll see what the big play is in a moment. So it's going to be Reality Smasher. Interesting. So this time around, we're in a little bit of a better situation than we were the last time this happened. And we can dredge a bunch of cards here as well. So I'm going to start with Stinkweed Imp. And then we're going to go for a Cathartic Reunion, pitching away the imps so that we can redredge them. So we do have a Bloodghast in the graveyard. So I think I'm going to dredge the Dakmor salvage here, actually. And just so we have a land to trigger the Bloodghast here. So we've got 2 Bloodghasts now, it looks like, and then this is going to then trigger the Prized Amalgam. So that's why sometimes you actually do want to dredge the land up in order to put yourself in situations like this. So we've got 5 different creatures into play, and we've still got a bunch of cards in hand, and now we're about to have more creatures in play. So we found a lot of our gas from our deck, and we have Conflagrate in the yard as well. So this is a pretty good spot, even though our opponent did have Tron this game. It's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to go for the Life from the Loam Dredge, because Life from the Loam is going to allow us to have more cards in our hand. And it's time for an attack. Just going to really put the pressure on now. So our opponent can block and still take a lot of damage though and go down to 5. So we do have potential lethal here. So let's see, we've got Gemstone Mine, which we're going to get back. I like going for the mines in the mountains as far as late game targets for Life in the Loam. And now it's just time to go for this Conflagrate. And we don't really need any of these cards very much. So, alright, sweet. That is gonna be game 2 there. So, in terms of a game 3, sometimes these decks have cards like Relic of Progenitus. They do get under Thoughtseize, so Thoughtseize, it's a little bit worse on the draw. That being said, we do still want it, I think. We want the Lightning Axes. So, I don't think we actually change anything just because we're on the draw. I'm going to keep this as is. And this is a weird hand. We've got double Lightning Axe, which kills basically every creature in the Eldrazi Tron deck. But a lot of lands, only one actual Dredge card in the Life in the Loam, but I think it's worth a keep. So it's a little bit of a weird hand, as I mentioned, but seems okay. And perfect. There's a Cathartic Reunion, so that was a good draw. Hopefully we can dredge into more Dredge cards after this Life from the Loam. So we actually don't have that many fetchable lands left in our deck. So the question now is, do we want to Loam or Reunion? And I think it is just Reunion. So we're going to discard the Life and the Loam first. And we can also discard one of the Stomping Grounds. Don't really need both. And okay, so we didn't dredge into another dredge card, but that's okay. Our opponent still isn't putting pressure on us, though. This is going to mean Tron is going to be online, which is a little bit scary. So we've got 2 removal spells. We have ways of pitching these cards. And actually, that's pretty bad news. There's a Relic of Progenitus. So we'll see if our opponent just immediately sacrifices it or not. It looks like the answer is going to be no. So we're going to end up taking the hit from the Smasher here. But we do have a play we can make. We're going to have to try to get around this Relic of Progenitus. So one thing we can do is actually upkeep Lightning Axe away this Reality Smasher. And this provides us with multiple discard outlets, actually. So we're going to discard to the Smasher itself and to the Loam. So we can get rid of the Amalgam and the Smasher and now go for a Dredge on the Imp. And it looks like we actually connected on the Dredge. So found some Narcomoebas. So that's good news. We also have 1 prize Amalgam that will be coming in. So we've got a couple of options here. I like the idea of just casting the Life from the Loam. We could go for another Dredge, but we have to be worried about this Relic getting sacrificed. We already found a lot of our Narcomoebas, so it's pretty unlikely we find more to get more prized Amalgams into play this turn. So I'm going to go for the Loam here. And this is going to mean that we have more cards in our hand for a potential Conflagrate. So our opponent may have been a little bit... I mean, it was an interesting decision not to hold up the Relic here on an empty board, which would have been tough for us to deal with. We were at least able to get some creatures into play, but we'll see what our opponent's follow-up is. So here's another Reality Smasher. So this Smasher is pretty bad news. We'll see. So our opponent can attack us with it, first of all. So it looks like that is going to happen, and we're just going to have to absorb this, falling down to 6 life. And, okay, there's a Matter Shaper, and maybe our opponent does sacrifice the Relic now, or maybe not. Okay, so it looks like still holding on to it. Interesting decision there. So we have a Conflagrate in the graveyard still. So I like dredging the Life from the Loam rather than the Grave Troll. with the plan being to go ahead and conflagrate, potentially. So it looks like we have one more basic land left in our deck. And we only have one other fetch land in the graveyard. So that's definitely something to be aware of. We have this Lightning Axe, which we can use on the Smasher. We have a Faithless Looting, so we could go for that. So we have some good options here. We also have a Neonate, so lots of options. And with this relic not being able to be used, we have to really consider how to best utilize this turn. So I think we want to start with the Lightning Axe to make sure that we have enough. Well, so the weird thing about casting the Faithless Looting after playing our land is that we may not be able to get a Bloodghast into play, which is pretty annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and Faithless Looting right now. We do have one Dredge card in the graveyard, we have two. We have one Golgari Thug and one Life in the Loam. So I'm going to first Dredge the Thug, then we get the Amalgam, and then we're going to discard. So we'll see if we hit a Bloodghast or a Narcomoeba, but it looks like we unfortunately did not on that particular Dredge. So now I like just going ahead and making this attack with everything. If our opponent wants to trade Matter Shaper for Prized Amalgam, that's fine. And then we can go ahead and answer this Reality Smasher. So I'm just going to go ahead and pitch lands because we have to still be worried about the Relic. So our opponent can attack us now, but it looks like maybe they have something else to do. Could have been a peeled Walking Ballista, maybe. Yep. So that was going to be tough to beat anyways. And we're stuck with this Prized Amalgam in the graveyard, as you can see. So our opponent, we are at 4, and the Walking Ballista has 4 counters on it. So we have a Conflagrate. We just never really got that turn to really untap and go off per se. So